Good evening to everyone. So the question I have for today is why? Why fashion? Why is fashion important? And if folks can probably enter in your chat, why do you think fashion is important and what it means to you? So fashion is something that helps me communicate who I am. It negates a persistent fear of death, where by buying clothes, jewelry, we have something permanent in our hands. And it also makes us consider for a second and broadens our horizon. And fashion is about storytelling through clothes. It helps us to connect. It helps us to change and shape lives through our personal connections to us all. So I have another why for you. And I do see in the chat, it's part of one's identity, fashion statement. Very true. Now, a second question. Why storytelling? So while I go through, once again, please put in the chat what storytelling means to you. Why do you think it's important? It's a powerful means that leaders must use to influence, teach, and inspire. It helps us to forge connections among people. It helps us to unite and build ideas. It builds trust, compassion, empathy. And it also gives you a permanency. While fashion tries to negate the fear of death, storytelling lets your legacy live on with your stories, just like the heirloom jewelries and the pearls that were passed on by your grandmother, or the polished cufflinks through your grandfather. So why am I talking about fashion and storytelling today? Because fashion is nothing but storytelling. Fashion is storytelling through clothes. So let's look at how fashion and the rules that apply to fashion applies to storytelling as well. They both can change ideas. They both can connect ideas. They can connect people and unite people. So everyone today, let's all be a story fashionista. So I, Kiranmayi, will take you through this journey. And by the end of the session, you would probably have some tips up your sleeves to be the next story fashionista. So the silhouette of a story. What does a silhouette mean? It's nothing but a structure. So a garment has a structure, a story has a structure. And here I give you a simple 3-letter acronym to help you remember this basically. TLC. It's not the 1990s hip hop group that was very famous for some songs. Unpretty, Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls. I'm actually talking about 3 letters that will help you remember the silhouette of a story. So that is tempt, learn, capture, and keep. TLC. So let's look at what this means in the world of storytelling. So let's look at a quick video here. And while the video goes on, please feel free to enter your thoughts in the chat as well.
Kiran, the video is not playing.
Yeah, it's playing. Can you hear the sound, Shama?
No, we can't hear you as well. The video as well.
Okay, that's fine. We'll just go through.
You just have to go to the Zoom panel and say share sound, then it'll be there. The
Okay.
more option, the 3 dot, if you click on that, and there'll be one option called share sound.
Okay, got it. Let me play again.
Yeah,
is this better?
Yeah,
okay. So this is a Louis Vuitton Spring Summer 2014 fashion show. And let me continue playing. So what were your thoughts on this? So when I first saw this video, and please go ahead and enter in the chat as well while we go ahead. My first thought was, this is a spring summer fashion show and everything is black and there's something ticking in the background. What could it be? I mean, fashion show, you should see models coming in, you should see them walking on the ramp walk with breezy clothes for a spring summer collection. But here I'm hearing a tick tock of the clock. And suddenly I see a light, a tree that lights up. And, it's quite surprising, right? I was mildly surprised. But I want to know more. I want to see or understand, how does this tie into a fashion show? And I kept watching the video, and suddenly I see a pool of water that's just glistening in the light of the tree. And suddenly a fountain starts throwing up water in the air in a very beautiful manner. And I'm more intrigued. I'm so enticed at that point as to, how do you get a water fountain on top of a ramp here, right? So overall, I felt this video was quite tempting. It was so tempting, I wanted to keep watching it over and over again. I wanted to keep watching the beginning to kind of see what are all the different nuances of the entry of this video started like, right? And few comments in the chat as well. So it's more a show. These shows don't really feature clothes that normal people wear. Yes, it is something different. So it's quite enticing. It's tempting. You want to know more. Why, you have a ramp walk, but it's something different. So you want to know more at that point in time. So in case of tempt, first impressions, they matter, right? There is an enticement that you need to have as part of a story to pull in your audience, to capture your audience's attention, to tempt them to keep listening to you. If you see, it only takes 1/10 of a second for the brain to form a first impression, and it takes 3 months of a snap judgment to last. And basically 55% of first impressions are based on appearance, right? So they basically matter. And how do you use this in the form of storytelling? Use an intriguing title slide, just like a smoky eye. Customize the slide, customize your story to match the foundation of your audience's skin. And just like a red lip empowers the wearer, empower your audience with different solution approaches when dealing with problems, or a story around solving problems, right? So that was the first part of the silhouette of the story. On to the second part, that is learn. So we learn with 3 modes. 20% of us learn with kinesthetics, or working with our hands, doing things, writing notes, making designs with our hands. 40% of us learn through visual cues, through watching videos, through watching presentations. And the rest 40% of us are auditory learners, where we learn through hearing speeches, or hearing the stories being told. So how do you use the learn part of the silhouette of the story? So there's multiple ways. In case of a story where you're trying to solve a problem for your audience or your customer, you can share ways to solve a problem. Move them from this problem is not solvable to a state where, okay, hey, maybe we can try solution 1, 2, or 3, right? You can bring in awareness. The audience would be richer or more knowledgeable based on the story that you have told. You can also use a story to progress decision making. So it could be to get that key approval for your high budget project. And you can also use a story to invoke emotions, the feeling of happiness, the feeling of goodness. So that's the second structure of the silhouette. And the third is capture and keep. So capture your audience and keep them with you for the entire ramp walk. Engage your audience for the entire lineup of your story. Don't just entice them and then let them go. Keep engaging them. And how do you use the capture and keep? Well, Chanel No. 5 is one of the most sold perfumes in the world today. And why is it so that across generations, Chanel No. 5 has managed to capture and keep the audience's attention? It stands for something. It sets the context of luxury, of exclusiveness. Seeing the bottle itself, it's so striking. Um, it looks so pleasing, and I would want to go and buy it, right? It makes a movement for me. It takes me from an ordinary professional to something extraordinary, where if I would use this perfume, I feel like, because the smell lingers on, right? I'm memorable. Someone, if they find this fragrance, once again, they remember you as a wearer, right? It respects the relationships. And also the design is quite beautiful over here. It looks very exotic. It looks luxurious. So it's maintained to capture the customer's interest and also keep their engagement going. So now we know what is the silhouette of a story. And now we move on to custom couture decks. You don't really need a deck to be able to tell your story, but sometimes it comes in handful. It could be one slide, it could be 20 slides. It's up to you to decide how you want to make use of the presentation that's available to you as part of your storytelling. But what is important is make it custom, make it couture, right? And we'll see how to do that. Now, I'm sure most of you may have heard about the little black dress, LBD, that Coco Chanel made very famous. Now you see, right, there's multiple styles. It's just a black dress, but there's so many different styles that can come out of just one color and a black piece of clothing. If you see, and why is it so iconic? The LBD is so iconic because of its versatility. Now, more closer to home, we have the infamous dhoti. Again, one piece of clothing and so many different ways that we can wear it across our nation. Once again, why is it so iconic? Because it's so versatile. So make your story versatile, make it custom, make it personalized. Now, it's a very simple statement, right? But it depends. It based on how much you practice in your storytelling. Your ability to make it versatile will improve as well. But I'll give you a quick tip in terms of how you can get started on your journey to make your story versatile, or what does it mean by making your story versatile? So let's see, how would you use a custom couture deck? Now, once again, in a nation where the sari is an infamous garment that we have today, right, closer to home, it's one 6-yard piece of clothing, and yet it has so many varieties that we use it for draping, right? So let's just take the sari as the general story, right? If you see at the top, the sari is just a general story. Now, if I break up that story, I can have a version story 1, story 2, story 3, or up to story N. And each story could be for a different segment, right? And by this, I don't mean that each story has to be different. It all has to tie back into that general story. But the difference could be, for example, a pitch to your CEO on an elevator ride. So an elevator ride, 30 seconds, that's all you've got. So if you have a story handy about the great things that your team has done, make sure you have a 30-second pitch, right? You don't know whom you may run into at any time. And the other version of the story could be a 15-minute story, for your immediate team who already know what's going on as part of the project, but you just want to give them the highlights. And then maybe a 30-minute story for the non-immediate teams where you want to highlight all the good stuff in detail to the cross-functional teams as well, right? So use a custom Couture deck, make your story versatile, and have different story versions for each segment of your audience. Now, moving on, we went through the silhouette of a story. We looked at custom Couture decks. Now on to some timeless tips. Tip number 1, avoid sloppy silhouettes. And here's my favorite. Who doesn't like Friends and who doesn't know Friends? Put it in the chat if you don't. So I'd be interested to know. So a favorite segment of mine from a lot of the fashion related shows are the hot or not section, right? What's hot, what's not. So let's look at this. You got Matt LeBlanc in a very crisp, shiny, structured suit. And then on the right-hand side, the very, sloppy version of Joey Tribbiani that you got over here. So definitely the left-hand side is a hot, right-hand side is a not, and let's look at why. So left-hand side, we've got the right rule of threes. Keep a crisp story structure and keep it simple and make sure your audience is engaged. And in case of the terrible trio, don't keep changing your story narrative. It just gets confusing. And don't have a lot of cluttered content in your presentation if you decide to use. And don't bore your audience. So on to tip number 2, don't over accessorize. So let's look at the hot or not. So you've got a lady with the classic pearls, very clean, very classic, clean lines. And then on the right, it's the same set of pearls, but the context is completely different. It looks like, I mean, I wouldn't wear it. I would feel quite choked about it. Doesn't look comfortable, right? So make sure clean, classic, don't over accessorize. So the right rule of threes, keep your slides to a minimum, keep your points concise, and use some pleasing colors and the right fonts with the right association. That's hot. What's not? The more number of slides you have doesn't necessarily mean you have more IQ. You can still have a one slider and still make a great impact. And you may have 20 slides and the impact may not be what you expected, right? Don't use complex language, keep it simple, and don't use a lot of complicated charts with jarring colors and fonts. And tip number 3, stick to your shape. And meaning in case of the Q&A, post your story, stick to what you know, stick to your style, right? In case of the fashion language, each body type has a different shape and you dress according to your shape. And hence, when it comes to the storytelling aspect as well, let's look at how do you stick to your shape when it comes to the question and answer session, post your story. So the hot right rule of threes, stick to what you know, prepare for the potential questions that may come out, and use the opportunity to reiterate some of your main points from your story. And what's not hot? Let's look at the terrible trio. Not making an effort to understand the question, answering blindly, and not preparing the audience on when to ask questions. Okay, so with these tips, I hope that you will be the next story fashionista in whatever story that you choose to tell. Stories are there everywhere, and make sure that, I hope that you make sure or you use some of the tips and the tools that were shared with you as part of the Story Fashionista session. Thank you, everyone. Stay stylish and tell your next story. Thank you.
Thanks, Kiran. It was really very much relatable to everyday clothing that we wear. Seasons changes, clothes changes. So I would let the people on Zoom or on the various social forum just ask some questions if they have, and then I might take one or two considering the time. So one of the questions that right away comes from Vijay is that, what is the minimum slides to create an impact?
So in my experience, I don't think I've had like a minimum number of slides. I generally look at what is the intent of the story that I want to tell. And I've made presentations, or I've told stories with 1 sliders, and I've told stories with 20 sliders. So it depends on who the audience would be, as I mentioned. Look at what your audience is, and based on that, you can look at what is the format of the presentation that you would like to make.
Okay, there is another interesting question that comes from Nikat Qureshi.
Mhm.
How to become a good storyteller verbally when there is no slides needed?
Sure. That's a great question, Nikat. So when you're telling a story verbally, you don't really have your presentation to fall back on. So what matters here? What do you have? What are the tools that you would have? One is your voice, right? If you're on a Zoom call, it is your presentation. So dress to be addressed, right? Look neat. Use your voice for modulation and bringing in the exciting. You can raise, for example, in case of voice modulation, in the areas where you want more impact or more excitement, you can raise your voice a little bit more higher. In terms of a more statement, you can keep it as a plateaued. And you can also use your body language to make impact in the areas that you want the audience to focus on. So I would say voice and body language are the key that you have over there.
Okay, we have many more questions coming in, and we have very little time for the next storyteller. So I would just wrap up with the last question, Kiran.
Sure.
All these questions revolve around how many minutes a short story should run, and what is the deck density of pictures versus words and things like that. So if you could kind of answer both of them, it would be great.
Sure. And I've got a great example, right? It's, we say that we wear only 20% of the clothes that you own, 80% of the time, right? So taking that into consideration, when you look at a slide as well, right? I would say this applies to your presentation as well. You would basically, the audience would focus on 20% of 80% of what you say, right? So from that sense, as I did mention earlier, that keep it minimal, keep a minimal number of slides, focus on just what you want to say and keep it precise.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Kiran, for answering all those questions. And if not anything else, I would definitely remember TLC of how to tend, how to learn, how to capture with the versatility. And one of the very interesting that you talked about was what's hot and what's not. So as a token of appreciation for sharing your knowledge, we present you the certificate of appreciation from Institute of Product Leadership. When you scan the code, it takes you to the Hall of Fame. Please accept it as a kind gesture for sharing your valuable experience here. Thanks a lot, Kiran.
Thanks so much, Satya. And also, if there was any questions that were not answered today, I'd like to urge the audience to drop me a note in LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to get back as well.
Definitely. From now on, we will start wearing the stories on our sleeves. Thanks for all the knowledge. Thanks, Kiran.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.